Home to the Sundance Film Festival, Butch Cassidy, and an expansive mountain range beloved by skiers across the country, Utah is one of America's most beautiful states. But it is also known to the true crime community as the birthplace of Gary Ridgway and was, at one point, one of Ted Bundy's favorite haunts. It is a state full of grisly cold cases. In today's episode, we'll be exploring 3 chilling, unsolved cases from Utah. Salt Lake City Jane Doe, 1986. On September 3rd, 1986, the badly decomposed body of an adult woman was discovered in a sewage canal east of the Salt Lake City Sewage Treatment Plant, located at 850 North Redwood Road. As investigators arrived on the scene, they quickly realized they had their work cut out for them. Not only did the deceased woman have no identification on her person, but her remains were so horrifically degraded that she essentially had no face and no fingerprints. The hair on the woman's head was gone, with only a small amount of pubic hair remaining. According to law enforcement, the bacteria in the canal's water had increased the rate of decomposition. It is estimated that Jane Doe had been in the water for about 2 to 4 weeks prior to her discovery. Due to the degradation of the body, Jane Doe's cause of death has never been established. Although suicide has not been ruled out, authorities have noted their belief that the death is suspicious. This is because they have been unable to find a missing persons report matching the victim, and because the site in which the body was found was rather isolated. It is believed that the body was dumped, or that Jane Doe had been killed on the spot and left in the canal, because to access the area, one would need to climb over a fence. Jane Doe is described as being a white woman between the ages of 20 and 40 years old. She stood between 5'5" and 5'6" and weighed around 115 pounds at the time of her death. The only identification marker investigators have is her dental records, which are still on file. Although detectives have little to go on in regards to Jane Doe's appearance, they recovered numerous striking items from the crime scene. Jane Doe was dressed in a handmade, long-sleeve, button-up white blouse that featured lace on the cuffs and a lace pattern on the collar. It also had 5 small, round buttons down the front. Furthermore, she wore denim jeans with a button and zipper fastening. The jeans had belt loops, but no pockets. Additionally, several items of jewelry were located, including a purple stripe bracelet that unfolded into a pen, an Advance brand watch with a black band, and a black and white checkered face, and a sterling silver ring. The watch had no numbers on it, and at the bottom read Quartz and Japan. Meanwhile, the ring contained a dark stone and was size 7 or 7.5. It had C and G and sterling stamped onto the inside of it. About 12 feet off the east edge of the roadway and 37 paces north of a utility pole on the bank of the West Canal, investigators discovered a dress. It was another handmade garment, this time made of blue fabric and featuring polka dots. It also had lace on the collar and sleeves. The dress had a cardboard tag attached to it with number 10 written on it, but had no other tags or markings. While it has been assumed that this garment belonged to Jane Doe, online sleuths have speculated that it may not be hers and is simply a red herring. The final items found with Jane Doe were a pink comb and a pink toothbrush. It is unclear where she was carrying these items, however, as she had no pockets and no handbag that we know of. Notably, Jane Doe was missing both her bra and her underwear. At the time of her death in 1986, law enforcement was unable to gather any usable DNA from her body. After taking her dentals, Jane Doe's body was cremated, leaving only a slim chance that DNA could be extracted from any bones or teeth left behind. In more recent years, her clothing has been examined for DNA, but nothing usable has been found. Additionally, in 2015, detectives explained that numerous items had been tested for DNA, but again, nothing had been found. It is likely that the canal water washed away anything that might have been useful. The biggest clue in Jane Doe's case is the dress found near the body. Investigators described it as seemingly clean and in good condition, and noted that the shape and style of it was similar to dresses worn by female members of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the FLDS Church. This led them to theorize that perhaps Jane Doe was a member of that church. In 2015, Detective Hillary Gordon, who was running the investigation, also stated her belief that the dress style was common among polygamous groups in northern Utah. She spent some time reaching out to such communities in both the US and Canada, looking for missing women who may match Jane Doe's description. However, it appears that her attempts were unsuccessful. Detective Gordon also suggested the possibility that Jane Doe was never reported missing in an official capacity. Her description doesn't match the missing persons report filed around the time her body was found. Exploring the FLDS Church connection further, Reddit users have noted that the church is known to reassign both women and men to new families. It has been suggested that nobody knew Jane Doe was missing because she was reassigned. Due to this practice, some members of the church haven't seen or spoken with their loved ones in years. It's also been pointed out that Jane Doe's clothing, which features jeans, lace, and polka dots, if the dress is indeed hers, doesn't line up with the modern-day fashion choices of members of the FLDS Church, although perhaps the rules were looser in the 1980s. Another hypothesis is that Jane Doe is actually from a conservative Mormon family, but not specifically a member of the FLDS Church, or that perhaps she was a member of a cult and either fled or simply snuck into the secular world. It has also been suggested that the dress was actually a part of a theater costume. In total, 11 women have been ruled out as being Jane Doe. Their names are listed on screen now. While Jane Doe's case has garnered some media attention in recent years, it is still unsolved. If you have any information about Jane Doe's identity or her killer, you can call the Salt Lake City Police Department on 801-799-3454. Elizabeth Salgado. On April 16, 2015, 26-year-old Elizabeth Laguna Salgado finished up her classes for the day at the Nomen Global Language Center, located at 384 West Center Street in Provo, and began to head home. A Mexican native and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Elizabeth had recently moved to Utah so that she could study English. She had been in the US for less than 20 days at the time of her disappearance, and had previously gained a degree in industrial engineering. A punctual student and hard worker, the 26-year-old shared a home in Provo with 3 other women at Branbury Apartments, located at 449 West, 1720 North. The apartment block was only about 1.5 miles from the school, and Elizabeth had no car anyway, so she began her walk home between 1:30 and 2 p.m. She was last seen carrying a denim handbag with red straps and wearing a denim jacket and blue jeans. On her way home, Elizabeth messaged her sister and one of her uncles. She had planned to go with him to Walmart later that evening at around 5 p.m. Both of her uncles had lived in Provo for over a decade by the time Elizabeth made the move to Utah herself. While the 26-year-old received replies from both members of her family, they never heard from her again. At some point, as Elizabeth walked down the busy streets towards her home, she vanished. On May 18, 2018, a hunter who needed to relieve himself found human remains in some bushes in Hobble Creek Canyon, around 15 miles from Elizabeth's last known location. Less than a week later, on May 23rd, authorities announced that they had identified the body. It was Elizabeth's. Due to the distance between the location where her body was found and where she was last seen, investigators suspected that the 26-year-old had been driven there. They noted it appeared as if her remains had been exposed to the elements for several years, suggesting that she was killed shortly after she vanished. Although Elizabeth's cause of death has never been established, her case is being treated as a homicide. A missing persons report was filed for the young woman after she failed to report to both her waitressing job and her classes in the days following her disappearance. In the initial aftermath of Elizabeth disappearing, her uncle, Rudenberth Salgado, stated at a press conference that he believed she had been taken by force. A year later, the family noted their belief that the 26-year-old was being held against her will. Several traits of Elizabeth's indicated to her family that she was taken to the creek by somebody she knew. Reportedly, the 26-year-old prioritized her education and work above all else. She would often decline social invitations, even from members of her church, and she never accepted lifts from strangers. She was also not confident in her English. All of this indicated to her loved ones that she had been driven to the creek by somebody she was familiar with and trusted, and somebody who spoke her native tongue. Investigators added their belief that the person who took Elizabeth was someone who was familiar with the creek area, as the place where her body had been left was off the beaten path and not part of a common hiking trail. It was also a rather difficult area to get to. Then, in July of 2019, a penny dating back to 2006 was located at a makeshift headstone in the canyon, near to where Elizabeth's remains were found. The penny had been discovered by Jason Jensen, the co-founder of the Utah Cold Case Coalition, who had been using a metal detector at the site as he searched for clues. Although it is unknown when the penny had been placed at the scene, traces of male DNA were found on it, and so the coin was sent away for forensic testing. A KSL-TV article from 2020 features a statement from Sergeant Spencer Cannon of the Utah County Sheriff's Office, where he notes that forensic testing does, unfortunately, take time. He also added, "It's frustrating that it moves so slowly. The evidence that we are getting back has not given us the kind of information that we need to specifically identify a suspect." That same year, Elizabeth's family stated that they still felt the void that the 26-year-old had left behind. Jason Jensen, the man who located the coin, originally planned to ask men who knew Elizabeth to voluntarily submit DNA samples. It is unclear if he ever carried out this course of action. More recently, he revealed to the media that a source had told him that the weekend before Elizabeth vanished, she had gone to the creek as part of a church activity. She and the other attendees had visited the mouth of the canyon, named Kelly's Grove Pavilion. However, as only one source had claimed this, Jensen was looking for further witnesses to corroborate it. The 26-year-old's family stated that they were unaware that she had visited the creek before, and felt the fact that she had made the placement of her body more than a coincidence. While there have been theories that one of Elizabeth's uncles was involved in the case, this appears to have come from the fact that their polygraph test came back as failed or inconclusive. As we know, polygraph tests are not an indication of guilt and are not admissible in most US courts. The only potential suspect that has been discussed in Elizabeth's case is a 30-year-old man named Adam Durborough. Durborough was living a few miles from the student at the time she went missing, and in 2020 was arrested for the murder of a 64-year-old woman named Sherry Black, who was beaten and stabbed to death in her family's bookstore in November of 2010. Durborough had not been identified as a suspect until a decade later. Following his arrest, he pled guilty to aggravated murder. While investigators have established no connection between Elizabeth and Durborough, they wanted to rule him out as being involved, as they suspect that he may have continued committing crimes in the decade between Sherry Black's death in 2010 and his arrest in 2020. Elizabeth's case is still open and active, according to law enforcement. While every avenue is being explored and pursued, answers are yet to come. During their investigation, authorities have hit numerous dead ends. If you have any information about Elizabeth's death, you can contact the Utah Cold Case Coalition tip line anonymously at 385-258-3313. Alternatively, you can call the Provo Police Department at 801-852-6210. Acacia Bishop. Born October 29, 2001, Acacia Bishop was just 19 months old when she was taken by her maternal grandmother in the spring of 2003, leaving her parents, Adam and Casey, devastated and desperate for her safe return. At around 6 p.m. on May 25, 2003, 38-year-old Kelly Jean Lodmell, Acacia's maternal grandmother, visited the toddler, who was being babysat by her great-grandmother in Salt Lake City while her parents attended a wedding rehearsal dinner. Lodmell had recently had her access to the 19-month-old girl revoked, although not by any official authority. Casey and Adam Bishop had decided against letting Lodmell babysit for the couple after they returned from an evening out to find that the 38-year-old didn't want to return their daughter. It wasn't until the couple threatened to involve the police, after half an hour of arguing, that Lodmell led the pair to the baby, who was being hidden in the basement of their home. Casey noted that her mother had always been strangely possessive of Acacia and wanted the baby for herself. Returning to May 25th, Acacia's great-grandmother left the room for a moment, which led to Lodmell seizing the opportunity to take the child. She and the toddler had disappeared by the time Acacia's great-grandmother returned. The 19-month-old was last seen with Lodmell in Idaho Falls the following day. The pair were close to the Broadway overpass and green belt next to the Snake River. At some point shortly after, they were seen when Lodmell turned up at a hydroelectric plant near the overpass, informing employees that she'd dropped her granddaughter into the river while they dangled their feet off the bridge. The plant was immediately shut down to stop the turbines from working and to prevent Alicia being sucked into them, and law enforcement was quickly called to the scene. According to witnesses, Lodmell was soaking wet and shoeless. Divers searched the river Snake for days following the incident, but Acacia was never found. A pair of baby shoes and a doll were discovered on the riverbank, while one of Lodmell's shoes was recovered from the water. The other was later located on the bank. The situation looked bleak. Detectives working the case believed that Acacia had drowned in the river and treated the case as a homicide, as they didn't believe that her death was an accident. They believed that the toddler had been purposefully drowned in a murder-suicide attempt. They theorized that Lodmell had purposely entered the water with the 19-month-old, and for some reason had failed to take her own life. Perhaps she panicked and came to her senses when Acacia was swept away. Speaking with Lodmell, investigators managed to gather a confession. The 38-year-old admitted that a murder-suicide is what she had originally intended, but claimed that Acacia was still alive. Still, as a result of her confession, and due to a lack of evidence that the toddler was safe, Lodmell was charged with kidnapping and murder. It was soon uncovered that Lodmell had a lengthy criminal record, a history of substance abuse, and several mental illnesses. The grandmother of one had been charged with numerous petty offenses over the years, including, but not limited to, drink driving, threats with a dangerous weapon, disorderly conduct, and aggravated assault. In 1999, she pled guilty to the latter for attacking a policeman. According to the Charlie Project, she was also charged with aggravated assault after shooting a child with a pellet gun, a charge for which she served 60 days in prison. Lodmell was also a schizophrenic and, additionally, had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She had occasionally spent time living on the streets and in her vehicle, and took medication for her disorders only when she could afford it. At the time of Acacia's disappearance, she was not taking medication. Despite the obvious scenario, Casey and Adam Bishop, Acacia's parents, held out hope that Lodmell was lying about what had happened. They thought it was possible that the 38-year-old was trying to conceal her granddaughter's whereabouts so that she could collect the child when she was released from prison, and they could live together. The Bishops claimed that Lodmell had never been suicidal or shown any such behavior, and added that they did not believe she would ever harm their daughter, as, again, she had never displayed such conduct. They characterized Lodmell as a habitual liar, and suggested that her confession was made up and that perhaps she'd been planning to abduct Acacia for months. In the months following Lodmell's arrest, the Bishops claimed that she sent them a letter from prison stating that Acacia was alive and well and was being cared for by other people, friends and acquaintances of the 38-year-old. She reportedly never referred to the toddler in the past tense. The Bishops had also pointed out that Lodmell purchased a large supply of nappies and milk formula for Acacia shortly before she vanished. They believed that this indicates that Lodmell truly had no intention of killing their child, but that she intended on running away with and caring for her. While investigators working on the case explored the theory that Acacia had been given away or sold, they found no evidence to corroborate this idea. Still, the Bishops continued to hold out hope that their baby was alive. They offered a $10,000 reward for anybody with information about Acacia's whereabouts, but the money, sadly, went unclaimed. The couple also issued a sketch of a man they think may be aiding Lodmell and who may be in possession of their missing child. The sketch was not created by any professionals and is not endorsed by law enforcement. The man portrayed in the sketch was allegedly seen checking out with the two from the Red Lion Hotel in Idaho Falls on May 26th, the day Acacia vanished. He is described as being in his late 40s or early 50s, with rough, weathered tan skin, graying, sun-bleached hair, hazel eyes, and a small build. His fingers and hands are his most distinguishing feature, described as being large hands with carrot-shaped fingers, suggesting they were larger at the bottom and tapered narrowly at the top. He is around 5'6" and smokes Basics cigars. If this man exists, authorities do not believe he is involved in any way with Acacia's case. Ultimately, Lodmell was tried for kidnapping in federal courts, but in January of 2005, she was acquitted by the judge, who ruled that she was insane at the time of the incident. The judge believed that she was delusional when she abducted Acacia, and felt Lodmell believed the 19-month-old was in danger, and that she had a duty to save her. Lodmell was soon found to be a danger to the community, largely due to her mental health issues, criminal record, and her history of both violence and substance abuse. As a result, she was committed to a mental health hospital for an indefinite period of time. Reportedly, she may be released if she shows signs of improvement and is deemed to no longer be a threat to the community, but this seems unlikely, as Lodmell has refused treatment for her illnesses and does not believe that there is anything wrong with her. Investigators believe that Acacia drowned on May 26, 2003. It has been suggested that Lodmell truly believes her granddaughter is still alive due to her mental illness. Some online sleuths, however, have wondered if the toddler really is being kept safe with friends of Lodmell. At the time of her disappearance, Acacia could walk, run, and say one-syllable words. Acacia is described as a white girl with reddish blonde hair and blue eyes. When she was last seen, she was just 2'6" and weighed 30 pounds. She was also wearing a pink sundress that had either daisies or sunflowers printed around the bottom. Acacia has pierced ears and a birthmark the size of a tennis ball on her abdomen. If she is still alive, she will be 20 years old. If you have any information about Acacia's disappearance, you can contact the Salt Lake City Sheriff's Office on 801-743-7000. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.